Well, another blow to the U.S.'s military strategy in Afghanistan. It turns out that the Afghan military is too broke to sustain its current size. So Afghanistan has announced they'll cut about 30% of its force. This will happen after NATO's mission there ends in 2014. And this announcement comes as the approval rating for the war is at an all-time low. Let's take a look now at the ratings over the years. Back in 2007, 56% of Americans said that the war in Afghanistan was worth fighting, while 41% disagreed. Now, support for the war went up significantly in June of 2011, just a month after President Obama announced that a Navy SEAL team had killed Osama bin Laden, but that support was pretty short-lived. In March of this year, we saw that number dip. This was right after hundreds of Afghan civilians began rioting and protesting American occupation of the country. This was all in response to an American airbase burning copies of the Islamic holy book, the Quran. Now, a new poll out today shows that American support of the war in Afghanistan has taken yet another dip, reaching an all-time low at a 30% approval rating and 66% disapproval rating. That's even lower than U.S. support of the war in Iraq at its lowest point. So with most Americans unhappy with the way things are going in Afghanistan, and in the wake of this recent announcement, we ask, was the war ever sustainable? Joining us now to talk more about this matter, retired U.S. Marine and RT blogger, Jake Diliberto. Welcome, Jake. Nice to have you here in the studio.
Yes, thanks.
So first, want to start off with that poll. We saw that approval rating for the war in Afghanistan at an all-time low. Why are Americans so unhappy with it today?
Well, a financial crisis. I mean, there's no way that the United States citizens, population, domestic support can sustain a war effort in any possible way, considering all the failed domestic issues. I mean, we've got a $15 trillion deficit. We've got a national infrastructure crisis. We've got emerging energy crisis. We've got financial woes with the Federal Reserve. The entire system that holds the United States up as a state, as an enterprise, is on the verge of collapse. So Americans are tired of it, and they're looking, where can we cut? And it's Afghanistan.
And so now Afghanistan has announced that they're going to cut back on their military because they simply can't afford it. What does this mean for the U.S.'s mission there?
Well, a couple things. First off, the Afghan army's largely supported, something like 90% of it is funded by the United States and NATO. So when they say Afghans are cutting it back, the Afghans are cutting back just whatever, tiny marginal piece of it. But I think what it actually means strategically for Afghanistan is that they have succumbed to the idea is capitulating to the Taliban, they're capitulating to the insurgency, and they're going to allow them to have the South and the East, and the Afghan army is going to largely patrol the North and the West.
So as you said earlier, so Afghanistan gets so much of its funding from foreign countries, and when NATO leaves and when the U.S. leaves, when they draw out their troops in 2014, Afghanistan, there's no way then that they can bear the burden on their own.
Yeah, that's correct. Afghanistan, I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, Afghanistan is the moon with gravity. It is a place that has huge mountain canyons, caves, an illiterate population, a tribal society that has never been governed. And so the idea of propping up being a state, being governed with justices and lawyers and this sort of thing was a fairy tale for a long time. And the way that the United States and NATO was hoping to bring a state about was first building up an Afghan security force, and then second having the regional powers support that effort. Well, the second part, the regional powers, Pakistan, India, was never going to support a stable Afghanistan. And then again, you've got the crisis of Afghanistan not being able a financial industry, an economy to develop itself from the inside out. So this was a long time coming.
And so we're seeing now that and Afghanistan is realizing that they can't sustain themselves. So then why then would the U.S. spend billions and billions of dollars building up this Afghanistan military that in the end wouldn't be able to sustain itself?
Well, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of ideas. Some people talk about oil pipelines. Some people talk about the U.S., being an empire. Some people talk about nuclear weapons in Pakistan, regional stability. I genuinely think that within the United States, our policy leaders have failed to realize where the crisis that we are in. And our policy leaders, when Obama was elected, thought that somehow surging inside of Afghanistan and recreating the Iraq that we had, whatever marginal successes in Iraq, recreating those in Afghanistan was a good thing for America. They lied to the American people, they distorted reality, and so therefore we are shooting ourselves in the foot all over again.
So, Jake, would you say that this is another sign of a failed military conflict? Is Afghanistan going to be any better off once the U.S. pulls out than before the U.S. intervened?
Afghanistan is screwed. There's nothing we can do to stop it. There's nothing that the coalition can do. There's nothing that anybody can do. Because there's tribal factions that go back for generations in Afghanistan that we have nothing to do, we can't control, we can't stop. So yeah, Afghanistan's screwed. And
so you just went into some of the hurdles that have always been in Afghanistan, and some people argue that it was a war that was never winnable to begin with.
Well, Liz, I mean, wars have to be won not just on the battlefield with troops and bullets and band-aids, not just with beans, bullets, and band-aids, but wars are done by politics. I mean, Clausewitz said that war is politics by other means. War is an instrument that states use to accomplish some sort of political goals. The problem with Afghanistan and Iraq and the whole global war on terror is that there was no political clarity, started from the Bush administration and carried on by the Obama administration. We don't have political clarity of what we're trying to do. And the reason we don't have political clarity or a grand strategy for America is because our foreign policy is a representation of our failing domestic policy. Americans and senior policymakers in America thinking that by going abroad overseas and fixing that out there can somehow fix the problems here. The problems at home are the problem, and our foreign policy is a representation of our failures back at home.
Now, you said earlier that you can't solve your problems just by bullets and by war, but some would argue that the Taliban is not necessarily a group that you can negotiate with and that you can deal with diplomatically.
Well, sure you can. I mean, you can negotiate with the Taliban. There's all sorts of negotiations that happen all the time. Just to give you an example, there's some people that made the same argument about opium trade. Oh, let's say you just get rid of the opium. Somehow the Taliban, that would fix the problem. The Haqqani network, something like 30 to 40% of the Haqqani network's funds come through illicit trade of pine nuts, pesto, pine nuts. Okay, so the war, the entire the operation taking place is that the Taliban, the insurgency, is about. They are a political group. They want money the same way anybody else does. They want power. They want all those sorts of things. You just have to find the resources, the negotiations to make it feasible for them. People said the same thing about Iraq, and Anbar province. Oh, those sheikhs are never going to join. They're never going to put their guns down. Well, sure they can. It just takes time. You have to be creative. The problem with the United States is that we've relied too much on the military to accomplish these things. We've put too much pressure the wrong places, and we've trusted corrupt leaders inside of Kabul. That's why we can't fix this problem.
But now you kind of pointed to more of a diplomatic solution. Is a diplomatic solution an answer or a possibility today?
Well, not as long as we continue the same process we're going. I don't see the United States changing its policy. I don't see the Obama administration changing for a variety of reasons. Basically, this is what's going to happen. The whole world needs to get this in their brain. The United States is going to stay till the middle of 2013 to 2014. We're going to continue training the Afghan army, and then we are going to leave. And then we're going to leave Afghanistan to the 350,000 people that we've trained. The future of Iraq, or the future of Afghanistan, will be with the Afghan army and the corrupt government that we left behind.
All right, Jake. Pleasure to have you here in the studio. I learned something new. Had no idea about those pine nuts. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. Thank you for your take on all this. That was Jake Diliberto, retired U.S. Marine and RT blogger.